The U.S. forces captured the man who claimed to be Venezuela's worker president, and what they found shattered his carefully crafted image forever. Over $700 million in seized assets, private jets worth millions, an $18 million mansion, a secret empire hidden while his people starved. Nicolas Maduro fooled the world for years, but his trillionaire lifestyle has finally been exposed. This is the shocking true story of how a bus driver became one of the world's most corrupt dictators. From palace to prison cell, January 3, 2026. U.S. forces took Nicolas Maduro into custody, ending his 13-year grip on Venezuela. The man who spent over a decade portraying himself as a champion of workers now faced narco-trafficking charges in New York. The timing wasn't coincidental. His capture came just days before his scheduled inauguration for another term following the widely disputed 2024 election.
It's a long walk to face the wrath of American justice for Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia.
The charges were specific: narco-trafficking, corruption, drug-related crimes built on years of alleged collaboration with trafficking networks. Federal prosecutors described his operation as mafia-style, a term that would prove accurate once investigators began tracking his actual wealth. For someone who once drove buses in Caracas, the accusations suggested a dramatic transformation. Within hours of his arrest, Switzerland froze his assets. The exact amount remains undisclosed, but Swiss authorities don't typically act on small accounts. The U.S. Department of Justice moved faster, announcing seizures exceeding $700 million in assets linked directly to Maduro and his inner circle. The assets weren't in his name. They rarely are. Family members, proxies, offshore entities. The standard playbook for hiding wealth while claiming modest means. The seized inventory told its own story. 2 private jets, one valued at $13 million, confiscated from the Dominican Republic where it had been conveniently parked. Multiple luxury homes across Florida. A mansion in the Dominican Republic carrying an $18 million price tag. A horse farm. 9 vehicles ranging from exotic to merely expensive. Millions in jewelry, including watches that cost more than most Venezuelans earned in a lifetime. These weren't investments or legitimate business holdings. They were accumulations. The kind of wealth that doesn't come from a presidential salary capped at 12 times the minimum wage, roughly $4,000 monthly by Venezuelan law. Even over 13 years, that salary totaled just over $600,000. The math didn't work, but the real number was always elsewhere. Transparencia Venezuela, an anti-corruption organization, estimated his actual fortune at $3.8 billion. Other reports suggested $1.2 billion stashed in tax havens alone. His wife, Celia Flores, carried her own estimated net worth between $2 million and $5 million. Meanwhile, their country faced the worst economic collapse in modern Latin American history. The worker president narrative had finally collapsed under the weight of evidence. Bank records don't lie. Property deeds don't lie. Aircraft registrations don't lie. Maduro had built an empire while Venezuela crumbled, and now that empire was being dismantled piece by piece in courtrooms thousands of miles from Caracas. The question wasn't whether he'd gotten rich. The question was how much remained hidden. Because the official numbers told one story, the real numbers told another. The $3.8 billion question. The official number was $2 million. That's what celebrity finance trackers and public estimates listed as Nicolas Maduro's net worth in 2026. For a sitting president, it seemed almost modest. Except nobody believed it. Transparencia Venezuela, an anti-corruption watchdog, put the real figure at $3.8 billion. That's not an estimate pulled from speculation. It's based on tracked assets, hidden holdings, and offshore accounts accumulated during his presidency. The gap between $2 million and $3.8 billion doesn't happen by accident. It happens through deliberate concealment. The methods were textbook. Offshore entities and tax havens held an estimated $1.2 billion structured through shell companies and proxy ownership that kept Maduro's name off official documents. His wife, Celia Flores, maintained her own fortune estimated between $2 million and $5 million, though her salary as a former Attorney General and National Assembly President never justified those numbers either.
Trade in and out will continue.
De nuestro petróleo y de todas nuestras riquezas naturales.
Our oil and all our natural wealth that by the Constitution and Bolivar's legacy belongs.
U.S. prosecutors didn't use the term mafia style lightly. The network they uncovered involved narco-trafficking revenues, misappropriated state resources, and systematic corruption spanning years. Venezuela sits on the world's largest proven oil reserves, and during Maduro's tenure, billions in oil revenues simply vanished from public accounting. Some went to maintaining power, much of it went elsewhere. The timeline matters. Maduro assumed the presidency in 2013. By 2014, Venezuela's economy began its collapse. Hyperinflation followed. Shortages of food and medicine became routine. Millions of citizens fled the country. Yet during this same period, Maduro's asset portfolio expanded dramatically. Private jets appeared, luxury properties multiplied, jewelry collections grew. The contrast wasn't subtle. While Venezuelans struggled to afford basic necessities, their president acquired an $18 million mansion in the Dominican Republic. While hospitals ran out of supplies, he wore a $43,000 Hublot watch. The optics were terrible, but optics only matter when someone's watching closely. For years, the full extent remained hidden behind layers of financial engineering. His background made the wealth accumulation even more questionable. Bus drivers don't typically build billion-dollar empires. Trade union leaders don't usually end up with international property portfolios. Even serving as foreign minister and vice president under Hugo Chavez didn't offer opportunities for this level of wealth generation, not through legitimate means. The U.S. sanctions imposed from 2019 onward targeted exactly this discrepancy. They froze assets, blocked transactions, and forced his network into increasingly complicated schemes to move money. Each sanction revealed more of the structure underneath. By January 2026, when federal prosecutors laid out their case, the $3.8 billion estimate started looking conservative. The question wasn't just where the money came from anymore. It was how much more they hadn't found yet. But the assets they did find painted a clear picture, and that's where the inventory gets interesting. Jets, mansions, and gold watches. The $13 million private jet sat on a tarmac in the Dominican Republic when U.S. authorities seized it. It wasn't Maduro's only aircraft. Investigators found two multi-million-dollar jets linked to him, both registered through proxy ownership structures. For someone earning $4,000 monthly as president, owning one private jet would have been implausible.
Impresionante. Ahí me llega todo por aquí. Teléfono que me regaló, mira, Xi Jinping. Esto me lo regaló Xi Jinping. Un Huawei. Mira.
Two suggested a pattern. The Dominican Republic mansion carried an $18 million valuation. The property, allegedly used by his family, featured the standard luxury amenities, multiple bedrooms, private beach access, the kind of square footage that makes the word home feel inadequate. Maduro denied ownership publicly, claiming it didn't belong to his family. The denial didn't explain why his relatives had access or who actually paid for it. Florida properties came next. Multiple luxury homes scattered across the state, each held through shell companies and family members. The exact number remains unclear. Financial investigators were still tracing ownership chains when the seizures began. A horse farm appeared in the inventory as well, along with real estate holdings in other countries. The portfolio suggested someone who invested heavily in tangible assets, the kind that hold value when currencies collapse. 9 vehicles made the seized asset list. Exotic cars, luxury models, the sort of collection that requires dedicated garage space and regular maintenance, not the transportation choices of someone claiming to represent working-class interests. Then came the jewelry, millions of dollars worth, though specific totals weren't disclosed. The $43,000 Hublot watch was just one piece. Maduro had been photographed wearing various luxury timepieces over the years. a $36,000 hublot King Power Diego Maradona, a $49,000 Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Chronograph, a $45,000 hublot Big Bang King Gold. He claimed the Audemars Piguet was a gift from soccer legend Diego Maradona, which didn't address the origin of the others. The inventory kept growing as investigators dug deeper. Cash holdings, potential stakes in businesses tied to state oil revenues, connections to narco-trafficking networks that generated their own revenue streams. Each asset raised the same question: how does a public servant acquire this much wealth? Back in Venezuela, the contrast was brutal. While Maduro accumulated private jets, his citizens couldn't afford food. While he collected luxury watches, hospitals ran without basic supplies. While he maintained international properties, 7 million Venezuelans fled the country seeking survival elsewhere. The average monthly wage in Venezuela during his presidency hovered around $30. His watch collection alone exceeded what most citizens would earn in multiple lifetimes. The assets told a clear story. This wasn't modest living. This wasn't a worker president identifying with struggling citizens. This was wealth accumulation on a scale that required explaining. So, how does a bus driver build a billion-dollar empire? That answer requires going back to where it all started, from bus driver to dictator. November 23, 1962. Nicolas Maduro Moros was born in southern Caracas into a working-class family that shared a modest two-bedroom apartment. His father, Nicolas Maduro Garcia, worked in leftist politics and labor unions, shaping the household's ideological foundation. 3 siblings completed the family. The apartment wasn't large, but it provided what the family needed: space, stability, a starting point. Maduro didn't pursue formal higher education. He attended high school, then later traveled to Cuba for political organizing training. The education he received there wasn't academic. It was practical, focused on movement building and ideological frameworks. He returned to Venezuela with skills that would prove more useful than any university degree. The 1980s found him driving buses for the Caracas metro system. It wasn't glamorous work, but it connected him directly to working Venezuelans and their daily struggles. More importantly, it positioned him within the Transit Workers Union, where he quickly became prominent. As a trade union leader representing workers' rights, Maduro learned how to organize, negotiate, and build coalitions. These weren't corporate boardroom skills, they were grassroots political skills that would carry him much further than the bus routes ever could. Hugo Chavez founded the Fifth Republic movement in the late 1990s, and Maduro joined early. The timing mattered. Chavez was building a socialist movement that spoke directly to Venezuela's working class, and Maduro's union background made him a natural fit. He understood workers because he'd been one. He could speak their language because it was his language. The political ascent came steadily. In 2000, Maduro won election to Venezuela's National Assembly representing the Capital District. 5 years later, he became Speaker of the National Assembly, a position he held from 2005 to 2006. The role gave him visibility, institutional knowledge, and connections throughout Venezuela's power structure. Chavez recognized Maduro's value. In 2006, he appointed him Foreign Minister, a position Maduro held for 7 years. The role meant international travel, diplomatic negotiations, representing Venezuela on the world stage. It transformed him from a domestic political figure into someone with global reach and recognition. By 2012, Chavez made him vice president. The appointment wasn't random. Chavez's health was failing, and he needed a successor who shared his ideology and could maintain his political project. Maduro fit the requirements perfectly. Working-class background, union credentials, years of loyal service, proven organizational skills. When Chavez died in March 2013, the transition was already planned. Maduro assumed the presidency on an interim basis, then won a special election in April 2013. The bus driver had reached the top. What he would do with that power was just beginning, and staying there would require methods Chavez never needed. The fraudulent throne. March 2013, Hugo Chavez died and Nicolas Maduro stepped into the presidency on an interim basis. The transition happened quickly, too quickly for genuine political consolidation. Within weeks, Venezuela held a special election to legitimize the succession. Maduro won in April 2013, but the margin was razor-thin and the process immediately drew controversy. Opposition leaders claimed irregularities. International observers raised questions. Maduro held the title, but he hadn't earned the mandate. The problem was obvious from the start. Maduro lacked Chávez's charisma. Chávez could command a room, inspire crowds, connect with people on an emotional level that transcended policy disagreements. Maduro couldn't replicate that. He had organizational skills and ideological commitment, but not the personal magnetism that had carried Chávez through multiple election cycles. When you can't inspire loyalty, you enforce it.
Es muy grande la causa que defendemos. Así que el cambio de régimen, además de ilegal, es inmoral. Y aquí no lograrán ni colonizar, ni esclavizar, ni a Venezuela, ni a América del Sur, ni a nuestra América.
The 2018 re-election made the pattern clear. International observers condemned the election as fraudulent. Opposition candidates faced harassment, imprisonment, or disqualification. Media coverage was suppressed. Vote counts were questioned. Multiple countries refused to recognize the results. Maduro won anyway, not through popular support, but through control of the electoral machinery and systematic suppression of alternatives. By 2019, international sanctions began targeting Venezuela directly. The USB, European Union, and other nations imposed financial restrictions, asset freezes, and travel bans on Maduro and his inner circle. The sanctions aimed to pressure democratic reforms and punish human rights abuses. They also revealed how much of Maduro's network operated through international financial systems, making the hidden wealth harder to access and easier to track. The 2024 election followed the same script. Widespread criticism, international non-recognition, accusations of fraud. The results were predetermined. Maduro would win because the system ensured it. Democratic processes existed in form, but not function. Elections happened, but outcomes weren't in doubt. Maintaining power required increasingly authoritarian measures. Political opponents were jailed. Protests were violently suppressed. Media outlets faced closure or censorship. The judiciary and military remained loyal through a combination of benefits, threats, and ideological alignment. Maduro built a system where challenging his authority carried severe personal consequences. This wasn't governance through consent, it was governance through control. Every institution that might provide checks on presidential power was either co-opted or neutralized. The National Assembly, the courts, the Electoral Council, all functioned as extensions of Maduro's authority rather than independent bodies. The strategy worked for over a decade. Maduro held power despite economic collapse, mass emigration, international isolation, and widespread domestic opposition. Force and fear proved effective substitutes for charisma and legitimacy, until January 3, 2026, when the strategy finally failed. But before his arrest, Venezuela paid the price, and the cost was measured in lives, the human cost. The numbers tell the story more clearly than words ever could. 7 million Venezuelans fled the country during Maduro's presidency. That's not a gradual migration, it's a mass exodus driven by desperation. People don't abandon their homes, families, and lives unless staying becomes impossible.
Forward 30 years, and now a shocking 80% of Venezuelans live under poverty, with the highest inflation rate and the second biggest displacement crisis in the world.
Hyperinflation destroyed the currency's value so completely that carrying cash became impractical. Prices changed daily, sometimes hourly. Savings evaporated. Salaries became meaningless. The average monthly wage dropped to around $30, enough to survive a few days, maybe a week if you were careful. Most weren't careful because there wasn't enough to be careful with. Food shortages turned grocery shopping into a daily hunt. Shelves sat empty. Basic necessities disappeared from markets. Malnutrition rates climbed. Parents faced choices no parent should face. Which child eats today? What gets sacrificed tomorrow? Hospitals ran without medicine, without supplies. sometimes without power. Treatable conditions became fatal. Preventable deaths became routine. Human rights abuses weren't incidental. They were policy. Protests met violent suppression. Political opponents faced imprisonment, torture, or worse. Speaking against the government carried risks that extended beyond the individual to their families. Fear became a governing tool, deployed systematically to prevent organization and resistance. Meanwhile, Maduro collected luxury watches. He acquired private jets. He maintained an $18 million mansion while his citizens couldn't afford bread. The worker president, who claimed to represent Venezuela's poor, was building a billion-dollar empire while they starved. The hypocrisy wasn't just offensive, it was obscene. January 3, 2026 brought accountability. U.S. forces took Maduro into custody, ending 13 years of authoritarian rule built on suffering and corruption. The charges, narco-trafficking, corruption, drug-related crimes, reflected years of criminal activity disguised as governance. Justice had been delayed. Venezuela's collapse couldn't be reversed overnight. The millions who fled wouldn't all return. The damage ran too deep for quick fixes. But justice wasn't denied. Maduro would face consequences. The empire he built would be dismantled. The hidden wealth would be seized. For Venezuela's people, it was something. Not enough, but something. Nicolas Maduro was never the worker president he claimed to be. Behind the socialist rhetoric and humble origins stood a $3.8 billion empire built on corruption, narco-trafficking, and stolen state resources. Private jets, luxury mansions, millions in jewelry, all accumulated while 7 million citizens fled starvation and collapse. The bus driver became a billionaire, and his country paid the price. How does someone claim to represent the poor while hoarding billions? Which part of Maduro's hidden empire shocked you the most? Share your thoughts below.